Hi everybody and welcome to an Ageoffantasy Skirmish Battle Report. And this time an unusual alliance of Goblins and Saurians will face the Undead. The awful sound of screaming banshees and the gloomy glow of approaching twisted souls reach the ears of both Goblins and Saurians. The Goblin leader and the Saurian Champion look at each other. They know in that moment that their only chance of survival is to face the dead together and unite their forces in battle. The old monastery's walls and garden will once again be the center of a brutal battlefield, and only in time these walls will know whether they are inhabited by the living or the dead. The Undead will deploy along the left side of the battlefield and the Goblins and Saurians in the middle right section. And the Undead are led by an ancient banshee armed with claws and howl. Then two mono banshees with hand weapons and shriek, two glaive stalkers armed with glaive, and then a wraith armed with great weapon. And all the Undead are of course undead and also ethereal. And besides that, the glaive stalkers are fast, and the mono banshees as well as the ancient banshee have the chilling ability that gives the enemy -1 to hit in melee. The Goblin leader has deployed on the backside of the monastery. He's armed with great weapon and he's also fearless. And the Saurian veteran on the other side is also fearless, has the predator ability and armed with great weapon. Then we have a group of Saurian warriors armed with hand weapons, and we have a group of shooters as well as a group of Goblin warriors. And they are armed with hand weapons and the shooters with short bows. And this battle is a point-based battle, so each of the armies will get points after these objectives. First blood, 1 victory point. Headhunter, the most expensive unit, 2 victory points. Conserve, to keep at least 50% of friendly units alive, and the opposite, attrition, at least 50% of enemy units killed. Both of them 1 victory point. And the most expensive units are the mono banshee and the Saurian veteran. But let's roll off. Red dice for the Undead, green dice for the Goblins and Saurians. And no doubt here the Saurians and Goblins will activate first. And the first unit to activate is the Goblin shooter unit here at the top of the monastery walls. And they move to the broken tower and then they aim at the mourner banshee. She is within their reach. They will need 6s because she has the stealth ability, but with 1 roll of 6 she is hit. And the mourner banshee has a very poor defense of 6. And she fails her defense roll, but she can rely on regeneration. All Undead with the ethereal ability can regenerate non-magic attacks, and she does in this case with a 5 or a 6, so no hits. Instead, she moves towards the Goblins to retaliate, and she is within reach of her shriek attack. 1 attack hitting on a 5 because the Goblins are in cover in the broken tower, but she rolls a 6, so it's a hit. It's AP 1, but the Goblins have a defense of 6 nonetheless. And they fail, so 1 Goblin is shrieked out of the tower and out of the game. The second unit of Goblin shooters moves slightly to get a clear line of sight to the Wraith. And the Wraith is hiding behind the rock, and he is also ethereal, so they will need 6s to hit anything. And very far from. So no hits from the Goblin shooters this time. The second mourner banshee advances, and that brings her inside her 12-inch range of her shriek attack. So 1 attack again, hitting on a 5. And no, she fails. The group of Saurian warriors are too far away to charge, but they move slightly, and that might bring them into charge distance of the Wraith or the Glaive Stalker. And the Glaive Stalker charges against them with the impact ability. So already one hit and a second hit against the Saurian warriors. And the weapon is an AP1 weapon, so the warriors will have to roll 5 to block the attacks. And one of them blocks with a 6, the other one fails with a 1, so one Saurian warrior is killed. And the 2 remaining can now strike back. They fight with hand weapons, so they have 2 attacks, and they hit on a roll of 4. And they do hit once. The hand weapon is an AP nothing weapon, but the Glaive Stalker has a defense of 6. So let's see if it can block the attack. No, but again, regeneration is possible. And that looks like a failed regeneration roll, so the Glaive Stalker will take 1 hit. And that will bring it down and force it to roll on the wound chart. A 5 or a 6 will take it out, but it's safe for now. Stunned. But the Goblin leader quickly takes advantage of that situation. With a charge, it immediately removes the Glaive Stalker from the battle. First casualty. But now the Goblin has exposed itself, and the Wraith is charging in with the great weapon with the Reap ability, and it will only need a roll of 3 to hit the Goblin. But it's a 2, so it's a failed attack, and now the Goblin leader can strike back with a great weapon and 3 attacks, hitting on a 5. And it's an AP2 weapon, so, well, 2 rolls and one of them disappeared inside the rock, so we'll roll another. But it looks bad. No hits at all, so the Wraith will back off 1 inch and the battle is over for now. Next up, the Goblin warriors. And they charge against the nearest mourner banshee. And she is tough to hit because she has the chilling ability, but they need a 6 and they roll 1 6. And then she will defend with a roll of 6, maybe, and she does. So, 2 rolls of 6, nothing happens. Now she can strike back though, and she will need a roll of 4. And she hits, so the Goblins will have to come up with a defense roll of 6. And they don't. So 1 Goblin is removed. And they back off 1 inch. But it's not over for the Goblins yet. Now the Glaive Stalker charges against them. It's fast and it has the impact ability, so already 1 hit, and then it will need a roll of 5. And that one fails. But the Goblins will have to defend yet another hit. And still a 6 is needed. And this time they step up their defenses and they can fight back now. They are fatigued, but they will need 6s to hit anyway. And they don't hit anything. The Glaive Stalker is disappointed and must move back 1 inch. And now it's time for the Saurian leader to decide what to do. If he moves too close, he will be within charging range and also within range of the ancient banshees howling. So instead he advances a strategic move in cover at the front entrance of the monastery. And speaking of the ancient banshee, she does not move, but she howls her attack against the goblins in the tower. She has 4 howling attacks, hitting on a roll of 4 because they are in cover. And one of them hits. It's an AP1 attack. So again, the goblins will need a 6, and the defense roll is not good enough, so yet another goblin shooter is out. And that was the end of the first round, even though the undead have attacked relentlessly against the goblins and Saurians. They haven't managed to take any units out yet. Let's see what happens in the second round. Will the Goblins and Saurian Alliance be able to defend the monastery? The Saurian warriors will activate first in the second round, and they charge against the Wraith. They will have 2 attacks, and they will hit on a roll of 4. And that looks decent, at least 1 hit. And the Wraith has a defense of 6. And that fails, so it will have to rely on the regeneration, and that fails as well with a roll of 4 only. So the Wraith takes 1 wound, and that takes it to the ground and forces it to roll on the wound chart. And most importantly, it cannot strike back. With a roll of 2 on the wound chart, the Wraith is stunned and the warriors will back off. And with the Goblin leader nearby, the Undead have no choice but to activate the Wraith immediately, because he will most likely be taken out if he doesn't get back up on his feet. So the Wraith activates and jumps back up. And with the Wraith back on his feet, the Goblin leader instead jumps over the wall and charges against the Mourner Banshee here. And he has several attacks, 3 attacks with his great weapon, and he will hit with a roll of 6. So let's see if he can do some damage to the Mourner Banshee. And there is a pretty good roll here. 2 hits, and it's an AP2 weapon. Doesn't matter because the defense is 6 anyway. So the Mourner Banshee blocks 1 of the attacks, but takes 1 hit. She still has regeneration though. And, well, she regenerates the wound immediately, so no damage is taken. The Mourner Banshee can now fight back against the Goblin leader. She has 1 hand weapon attack, but it's a poisonous attack. She will need a 4 to hit, so she fails, and the Goblin leader must retreat 1 inch. And now the moment the Undead forces have been waiting for. The Glaive Stalker charges against the Saurian leader. The leader is the most expensive unit, so by taking him out, the Undead will earn 2 victory points. The Glaive Stalker with the Impact ability has already 1 hit, and with another roll of 6, the Saurian leader now will face 2 attacks. And it's an AP1 weapon, so a 4 is needed to block. The first one fails. What about the other one? And it's a well-hidden roll of 6, so the Saurian leader blocks 1 attack, but he fails the other, and he takes 1 wound. But now he can fight back. And the Saurian veteran leader has 3 attacks, hitting on a 3. So let's see. 3 attacks, 2 of them hit, and also the third one. So 3 hits against the Glaive Stalker. They are AP3, but the Glaive Stalker has a weak defense of 6, blocks 1, fails the other, and then a regeneration roll also fails. 2 hits against the Glaive Stalker. And that will of course take it down. And now a rather tricky roll on the wound chart. It's a 5. The Glaive Stalker is out of the game. Nice move by the Saurian veteran. And that was a costly attack for the Undead. Now the 2 brave goblins attack the Mourner Banshee. And they still need 6s to hit anything. And, well, no. Sadly not. The Mourner Banshee has already fought. Now she will need a 6 to strike back against the goblins. and she also fails her attacks. And the Banshee activates now. She has been attacked twice, but she hasn't activated yet herself. Now she does, and she shrieks the Goblin in the tower. And she does not hit anything. A roll of 4 was needed. Now the other Goblin shooter group moves to the edge of the ruined walls, and from here they are within shooting range of some of the undead. And they this time decide to target the other Mourner Banshee. So they fire their 3 arrows against her, again needing 6s. One of the arrows will hit, and that means she will need a defense roll of 6. She fails. What about regeneration? No. So she is actually hit by the Goblin arrow. Pierced by the arrow, she goes down with 1 wound, and the roll on the wound chart, it's a 4, so she is stunned, very close to be knocked out, and that would have brought the undead to half strength. Well, that didn't happen, and the Mourner Banshee jumps back up. And immediately after that, she is again under fire by the lonely Goblin in the tower. He will need a roll of 6. It could happen, but no. Not this time. And then the Ancient Banshee activates. She advances across the battlefield towards the monastery, and then she attacks the Saurian leader with her howling. She has 4 attacks, and she will need a 4 to hit because he is in cover. So 4 attacks, hitting on a 4. And she even howls out the window of the monastery. 3 hits against the Saurian leader, and that could be really dangerous. It's an AP1 attack. And he will need to roll 4s to block. He is already wounded with 1 wound. And he makes 1, but he fails 2, so he takes 2 additional wounds, and that brings him to 3. He is down, and that could be the end of the Saurian leader. He is the most expensive unit, and that will earn the undead 2 victory points. But he has to roll on the wound chart first. A roll of 5 or 6 will remove him from the game. But he rolls a 3, so he is stunned, but not yet taken out. And no victory points yet to the undead. So immediately he activates and gets back up, but heavily wounded. And that was the last activation of the second round. Really, really close call for the Saurian leader. And even though he is in the game still, he is heavily wounded. The undead have lost both their glaive stalkers, so 1 more unit down, and they will be down to half strength. We'll see what happens in the third round. And this time the undead activate first, because they finished first in the previous round, and the Ancient Banshee, of course, attacks the Saurian leader again with her 4 howling attacks. But this time she rolls rather badly, so only 1 hit, but still the Saurian leader has to defend, and he does with a roll of 6, so he's not affected by the awful howling of the Banshee this time. But something must be done. He is heavily wounded, but if he has a role to play in this battle, it must be now. So he charges against not the Banshee, but the Mourner Banshee. And the Saurian veteran has 3 attacks, hitting on a roll of 4. And apparently he is too messed up to hit anything. He fails all attacks, and now the Mourner Banshee can fight back against him. 1 attack with her poisonous hand weapon. She will need a 4. And that's a hit. Once again, the Saurian leader is hit. He will block the attack with a roll of 3, and, well, he manages to get out of this battle without doing any damage, but also relatively safe. He is still wounded though, so he backs off, and next up, the Mourner Banshee moves away. She has fought now, but she uses her shriek attack against the Goblin in the tower. And she will hit with a roll of 5. And again, she shrieks at the Goblin, who will block with a roll of 6. And very far from a 6, so he takes 1 wound. He goes down up in the tower, and the roll on the wound chart is good enough for him to be stunned. And the 2 Saurian warriors once again targets the Wraith. 2 attacks with hand weapons hitting on a 4. And one of them is good. And again, the Wraith needs a 6 to block. No. What about regeneration? No. So 1 more wound to the Wraith. That could be the end of him. And if so, the Undead are cut down to half strength, and that will earn the Alliance a victory point. 2 wounds, and now let's see the roll on the wound chart. It's a 2, so the Wraith is still alive. The second Mourner Banshee moves slightly back, and then she shrieks at the stunned Goblin. She only needs a hit, and then he's out, and she will hit with a 5. And that's a solid hit of 6, so the Goblin is out of the game, and the Undead have finally removed 1 unit. Now the Goblin leader has several options to attack, but he uses his brain and turns around and charges the stunned Wraith. So he earns attrition now because he takes the Undead down to half strength. And that will earn the Alliance a victory point, and that will also force the Undead to morale tests. The other unit of Goblin shooters targets the Ancient Banshee. They will need a 6, and they hit once. And she fails her defense roll, and she also fails her regeneration roll, so she is hit by 1 of the arrows and takes 1 wound. And finally, the unit of Goblin warriors charge the Mourner Banshee here. Again, 2 attacks, hitting on a 6. And good roll, but 1 hit it is. She will need a 6 to block. And she has a very solid defense. And she can fight back now. She hits with a 5. And the Goblin warriors will have to defend with a 6. And that does not look good. No, 1 of the Goblins is removed. And the remaining warrior backs off 1 inch. Here at the end of this round, the Undead will face morale tests. So they will take a wound if they roll a 1 or a 2. And let's begin with the Mourner Banshee here. And with a 4, she's safe. What about the other one? And she's also good. And now the Ancient Banshee, she has 2 wounds left, so she will roll 2 dice. And she rolls a 1, and that means she takes an additional wound, and that takes her to 2 now. At the end of the 3rd round, things are looking more difficult than expected for the Undead forces. They have been cut to half strength, and they have to go for the Saurian leader to earn at least 2 victory points, but they also have to keep the rest of the forces alive. Let's go to round number 4. And since the Undead activate first, there is a golden opportunity to earn 2 victory points by eliminating the most expensive unit in the Alliance, and the Ancient Banshee can do the job. She has 4 howling attacks, and she will hit on a roll of 3. and she hits 2 of them. And it's an AP1, so the Saurian leader will defend with force. But he is really exposed. But he does defend both attacks. No hits. So he is still standing, and wow, it looks certainly difficult for the undead now. He is wounded, but he refuses to go down. Instead, his Saurian warriors charge against a Mourner Banshee. And the warriors have 2 attacks. And they hit on a 4. But no hits this time. But the Mourner Banshee can strike back against them. And she has 1 attack. And she also hits on a 4. And no. So no hits at all, and the warriors back off. And the Banshee immediately advances to another position, and again they try really hard to bring down the Saurian leader. 1 shriek attack, and she hits on a 4. No, again a failed attack. It's almost like he is enchanted by something. And the goblins at the top of the monastery walls now move to the tower. And from here they fire all they've got at a Banshee. And they will, as usual, hit with rolls of 6. And again they manage to send 1 arrow in the right direction. But, well, again, the attack is blocked. And now, the last activation from the undead forces and the last try to bring down the Saurian leader. 1 shriek attack, hitting on a 4. It's a 6, so the attack is good. What about the defense roll? And he fails his defense roll. So that takes him to 4 wounds now. This could be the chance for the undead to earn 2 victory points. A roll of 4 or more on the wound chart and he's out. And it's a 3. He is stunned but still alive. They really tried to take him out, but heavily wounded, he gets back on his feet. And he is still standing. The Goblin leader has eliminated 2 units, but in this activation he cannot reach anybody, so he joins his allies close to the undead, but he's too far away to do anything. And finally, the Goblin warrior, in a crazy moment of courage, charges the ancient Banshee. He has 1 attack, and he needs a 6. Well, close, but not enough. And the Banshee can now hit him back. And she has 3 claw attacks. She needs a roll of 3. So she will claw 2 attacks into the poor goblin, unless he can come up with 2 6s. And as expected, he can't. So he goes down with a couple of wounds. And his fate on the wound chart is that it was just too much for him. So he leaves the battle. Poor goblin, but he tried. And at the end of the round, the undead will be forced to take their special undead morale test. And the first Mourner Banshee passes the test. The second one also. And finally, the ancient Banshee, on a roll of 1 or 2, she will take a wound, and she rolls a 1 again. So she is actually on 3 wounds now, and she hits the ground here at the end of the 4th round. And let's see if she is out for good. No, she isn't, but she is stunned. So both armies are at half strength at the end of round 4, and that will earn them 1 victory point for conserve. And that means that the final score in this battle is the Alliance 3 victory points, and the undead 1. And the twisted undead souls will perish, and the goblins and saurians look at each other. They have overcome the undead forces in an unusual alliance and in an incredible act of courage. The old monastery is big enough to keep both goblins and saurians safe inside. Thanks very much for watching this battle report. I hope you'll join me for future bad rips.